what happens is there is a lot of corruption, way more than a right-wing government, but there is so much oppression that the news of this corruption doesn't even go out. Whereas in a right-wing government, there is much lesser corruption, but it is made to look as though it is 10 times more by the media houses and by the leftist parties and the centrist parties. What we need to also understand is that now the opposition might claim, ever since the right wing policies have come into place and right wing politics has come into place, there have been mob lynchings. But to lose 50 cases cannot define the general trend in a population of 130 crores. And these incidents cannot be put on the head of the government, considering the fact that this can even happen when there is a centrist or a leftist government in power, right? What the right wing governments do is that they create a sense of unity in people's mind. They bring about a strong nation. Taking, for example, the recent actions of Swachh Bharat, taking, for example, Make in India, it brings about economic growth as a whole. And this economic growth helps the entire population of the country and not just one religion. Now, the basic premise that politics is only based on religion because is itself flawed because factors such as geopoliticism and economics and the
I
class
have a
structure.
POI.
I will take it later.
Participant, you cannot take it later. I'm really sorry. You can only take it before the 5 minutes, like right
Sorry.
now, or you can continue with your saying.
I would like to continue with my debate, with my speech.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Can you give me just a second to assemble my thoughts?
Sure.
Yes. So what the proposition was saying, that the basic premise that right-wing politics is only on the basis of religion is flawed, because other factors such as geopoliticism and economics and the economic structure is also really important to look into. What the left wing and the centrists are doing, that they are hiding behind the garb of intellectualism to attack the country. They do not want the country to be a strong country, and this is something that will harm the basic harmony. And this is something that we might learn the hard way if we do not start appreciating the right-wing government that do exist in the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
How much time do I have left?
You have 30 seconds left.
All right. So, in conclusion, what the proposition is stating is that there are many good things about the right-wing government that are not highlighted, and there are a few bad things that are blown out of proportion by the left-wing and the centrist government. What we are saying is that religious conflicts did even exist before right-wing or left-wing or any form of government even existed. And all this is just a tactic to gain votes and to gain attention. And this is what we want to clear out. And the member of the parliament will also communicate the same.
Okay. Thank you so much, participant. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege?
No.
Okay, thank you. With that, we move on to the next speaker. The leader of the
A point of personal privilege.
Go ahead.
If a speaker has some left time, can he yield his time to points of information in the end?
No. If he rests his case, then he cannot raise, take his time out for a point of information. In case you try finishing your this thing, say if you finish before the 5-minute mark, you still have a few seconds left. At that point of time, if someone wants to raise a POI, you can answer them at that point of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Fine. With that, we move on to the next speaker, leader of the
Give me
opposition
10.
party. Sorry?
Give me 10 seconds, please.
Go ahead. Feel free to start whenever you want.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You can start.
Good morning, House. First of all, I would like to just point out that the government's first primary burden is to explain the motion in the House, which our government failed to do. I'm really sorry for that. So for the purpose of this House, I'll be explaining the entire motion in the House word by word. First of all, I'll be focusing on the conflict part. What is a religious conflict? What is a conflict and what is a religious conflict? And then I'll be going to the right-wing ideological part. Like, what is right-wing ideology? So conflict broadly means both violent ideological and political clashes to reveal India's religious conflict as a dynamic clash, not an occasional one. Religious conflict is a conflict among the people of different religion, that is by means of riots, violence, physical abuse, verbal abuse, etc. Talking about the right wing ideology is a way of thinking. These are those people who believe themselves as conservatives, nationalists, and Republican. The basic principle over which the idea and belief of a right wing person lies is social conservatism. Social conservatism refers to the ideology that is against the change and prefers to maintain the old system, tradition, and beliefs. But a right wing person is also economically liberal. The major issue that leads to religious conflict in a nation is not the aspect of economical liberalism, but the religious conservatism and tradition. The conservative part is the major issue where the right wing ideology is actually leading to having religious conflicts. Uh, Being literal, right wing are people with that believe in social conservatism and economic liberalism, as I already told. The right wing ideology in India is referred to as the people in support of a religious ideology, that is the dominance of a particular religion over governance of the nation and other religions of the country, the other religious groups. The government of India, which is a major stakeholder in today's debate, has a soft corner for Hindus. So our entire debate will unravel itself from the point of a Hindu ideology, and then we'll go to a Muslim ideology, to a different ideology, how right wing is related to any particular religion. Dominance of a religious ideology in the government of a nation is the first step towards the end of democracy. The reflection of establishing Muslims as a second class citizens in the country using Citizenship Amendment Act led to a lot of religious conflicts. From JNU case to the Aligarh Muslim University case shows how the government has been a biasness in dealing with people of different religion leads to not only conflict but to an extent of civil war and bloodshed in the country. The preamble of our constitution defined India as a secular state, which is against the principle of a right-wing person or government. Now, since the current government of India is a right-wing government, it is clear by the various decisions taken by the current government. They do not have secularism at its core and have biasness towards a particular religion. The different outlook of a nation's government in terms of religion shows how they do not support the constitution of a country. The way of the way of handling their issues leads to a fear in the minds of other religions to which government do not support. The fear stems anger and outrage and further leads to riots and fights. The classic example will be the Tanishq ad that is going around in social media nowadays. So what is happening in the Tanishq ad? They shows a beautiful ad where a couple which belong to different religions come together and marries, which faced a backlash from the community itself because they were showing an interreligious marriage, which is according to the principles of secularism. Now, how is government responsible in it? Uh, First of all, the major idea and feeling of majoritarianism that stems in the people's mind comes from the government itself, which leads to people thinking that interreligion marriages are wrong, but which is again according in compliance with the constitution of our country. Talking about irrespective of the religion, the right wing person follows it definitely creates unrest and conflict among the people of different religion. We have seen in the past, whenever a right wing power has been in the center of a nation, it has turned into a bloodshed. From Nazi Germany to Mughal India gives each us ample of example, the ample of examples and scenarios to how the nation with right wing ideology end up. The political fuel has created a divisions among the minds of people. The right-wing ideology has led to backlash of the beautiful ad by Tanesh and the backlash of the constitution itself, the principle mentioned in the constitution. The government's soft corners to Hindus, making lack of action by the police, which are under the instructions of central government, has led to a lot of and rising number of clashes in the religion. This soft corner, which stems from a right-wing ideology, has motivated more and more people to be outrageous against the minority of the nation. The outrageous steps taken by the people of right-wing ideology give us a motive gives a motive to other religions to strive for equality in the nation, this power struggle actually leads to a religious conflict. So what happens is, when one particular ideology is supported by the government of the nation, that that gives a particular soft corner to the people of that particular religion, which becomes outrageous because they know that the government won't be taking any action against them. So this creates an unrest amongst the other religious groups, and they come out because of, initially because of the fear, but to raise their voice for the equality in the country, and this leads to a further religious conflict in the nation. A really infamous example, another conflict which stems from a right-wing ideology was the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. Again, right-wing ideology is not restricted to a particular religion. Again, every religion can have right-wing ideology. To sum up my entire speech, I would just say the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits was led by a Muslim majority in a state of Muslim majority, where the right-wing ideology prevalent was related to Muslims itself. So this shows us
Okay.
how right-wing ideology has actually led to bloodshed in the entire nation. Thank
Okay.
you. I would like to rest my case by just stating that this claim in the House should stand, that the right-wing ideology in India has led to religious conflicts. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, participant. Just make sure the next time you don't talk after the 6 minute mark has been done. Uh, with that, points have been noted. Is there a point of order or a point of personal privilege that the opponent team would like to raise? Okay. With that, we move on to the next speaker of the House, the member of government. The floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Okay. So when we talk about religion, we can't remove secularism, which is an essential topic about it. Now, what essentially is secularism? We need to understand that first. The first concept of secularism, as it was described, was that the church, that was a prevalent nature in Europe and America, should be free from the state, and the state should be free from the church. That means both cannot intervene in the other's matter. Now, in India, our constitution makers realize the fact that the state cannot be free out of the religion, and the religion cannot just go freely without the state. That is the reason that secularism as a word was not added in the preamble, and India was as such not secular. Though it guarantees the right of equality to all religions and the right to preach or practice any religion to all people. Now, after the amendment, in the emergency amendment, in this, Indira Gandhi added the word secularism in the Indian preamble. But what I would just like to say again is that India was as such never secular, because the state had to in the end intervene in religion in several matters to make changes in Hindu personal laws, in Parsi personal laws, and even as we know, it made changes. It abolished untouchability, which was definitely for the betterment of the country. Now, what has actually happened by this scenario is that after the amendment, secularism has been a motive, and the centers and leftist governments have been standing behind minorities, pertaining that these minorities are being subjugated and it violates secularism at every time. It's being blown out of proportion every time. Now, I would like to ask, as the government itself, as the opposition itself stated, that right wing ideology does not originate from a specific religion. It can even generate from the national minority, but it might be a majority in a specific state. For example, you talked about Kashmir. There is another state called Mizoram in India itself, where the elections, the dates, the candidates all cannot be fielded and cannot be released in public without the church authority. Now, this needs to go away. If actually the government is concerned about everyone, then it should also note that all the people are not same. Yes, so I would like
POI,
to take a POI.
just you gave the example of Mizoram. How is it is actually related to the right-wing ideology that is not leading to religious conflict? My question stems at how right-wing ideology is not leading to religious conflict, how it is shown in the example of Mizoram, because the motion states that.
With the example of Mizoram, I was trying to show that even the national minority, as such Christians, are a majority in the state of Mizoram. And what they're doing is they're not letting the minority get away with the things that they want, and are actually subjugating them. Even election dates can't be released in the state without the church authority. Why is that happening? Won't that lead to, that is also leading to religious intolerance? The Congress party, which is centrist party, was leading the state for 20 years. This was still happening. I would like to ask this: why is this happening? Now, talking about India as such, we know that we have a Hindu majority population, and the main thing that comes with associated with right wing is the Hindutva ideology, which we all know what it is. But just to describe it, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, Hindutva is the state of or quality of being Hindu, and according to Merriam-Webster's Encyclopedia of World Religions, it's this feeling of Indian culture, national and religious identity. Now, this actually describes what Savarkar originally pointed out what Hindutva was. Savarkar pointed out that everyone who has a common nation, grace, and civilization beyond the Sindhu River or the Indus River is actually a person who follows the Hindutva identity. It does not necessarily say that uh, all Hindus are nationalist, but it's trying to say that even other religions who have subjugated them to the culture, to the civilization, are actually a part of the movement, are actually associating with the feeling. Now, again, reiterating the fact that the reason why right wing government first come into power, the people are only voting the right wing government, is because, as we saw in Europe, European countries, and as we're seeing in India, the right wing government follows a period where leftist or centrist governments are ruling and are corrupt governments. As we saw during the period from 2004 to 2015, India was ruled by the UPA government, which was essentially a center leftist government. And we all saw that how there were scams each and every day. And whereas in the right wing government, that is right now the NDA government, we don't have that many scams, or even if there are, the centers and the media houses that are controlled by these leftist parties are being blown out of proportion. The voters itself are voting for the rightist government. That means that they also know that what is right and what is wrong in the country. As again reiterating the fact that let's talk about what happened recently, the Ram Mandir Janmabhoomi, the Shilanyas. And essentially it can be pointed out that in India, the realization of politics was actually due to the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. Now the prime minister went for the event, and it was a big issue created out of it, even on social media, that the prime minister shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be doing that. Now what we need to identify is that the people who were defending them said that it was not right and that it shouldn't be done. Now, what I would just like to say
EY.
is that even the 5 minute mark is up, sorry, and yeah, the prime minister also has the right as any other citizen to go anywhere he wants and to practice any religion that he wants. Secondly, coming to the fact, he, as it's already been stated, these Hindutwas are trying to protect the Hindu ethos. There is archaeological evidence that the mandir was there and that there should be there. Now, what I'm trying to say, that doesn't mean that it's trying to intensify the religious conflict in the country, and that it's just a way to promote one's feelings, one national identity, and one's cultural belonging. Saying that okay, I belong to this culture, or I belong to this religion, and I'm ready to stand for its ethos. With that, I would like to conclude my speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay. Thank you so much. Participants, please note that before the 1 minute mark and after the 5 minute mark, you cannot raise your hands for a POI. Okay. With that, we move on to the next speaker. The member of the option party, floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I will be starting in 10 seconds. Okay, so first of all, a very good morning to everyone present in the educator, the moderator, and the members of the government. Now, as rightly said by my leader, the motion before the House is how rise in right-wing ideology is leading to religious conflicts. Now, what the government failed to show us in the House was that how it does not lead to religious conflicts. In fact, they went ahead and what they argued was that conflicts happen either ways. Either you're right wing or left wing, conflicts will happen. But what they failed to propose in the House was that the reason behind it. Now, as my leader already mentioned, conflict is the active politicization of religion for political gain. That is what conflict describes. And violence, as we all know, it can be linked to it is linked to the ideas of the past, because, and it is not natural, rather than a deliberate and a very successful political strategy that the members follow to because what happens when religion conflicts happen, people gather in a large scale to take part in it, and more often than not they're misguided, they're misdiverted, and the conflicts get early and the scale rise. It can be and conflicts happen all across the country in all the various forms, in all different stages, as rightly mentioned. In the form of verbal abuse, can be in form of riots, can be on social media. And nowadays it is, as we gave it for an example, it is happening in the advertisement industry, where an advertisement was pulled down. So now furthering our argument, I would like to state that the since the government, the honorable prime minister took us back in back in the time and talked about before 1947, how there were no religious conflicts. Well, there wasn't, because there was no government that was ruling us. We were being ruled by British. So that is to say that there was no one, and in that we were united. But what happened as soon as the British left, the riots happened at such a scale that it led to the partition of the country on the basis of religion. Pakistan was made on the basis of Muslim majority, and India was based on the basis of Hindu majority. Now coming to India, when we talk about India, 80% of the population is Hindu, and the minority 15% of it is Muslim. Now we as opposition, we even went ahead on the floor and argued that right wing ideology is not necessarily limited to just a religion, that is the Hindu or Muslim. It happens in both, where any of the religion is in majority, they tend to oppress, or they tend to make laws or promote their and propagate their religion in a way that harms the minorities. Now what happens is, when a group of majority is forcing itself on a group of minorities, they will retaliate in at some point, in one different form or the other. It simply cannot be stopped, because what happens is, when if you keep oppressing or if you keep bringing down other people, at some point they're going to be outbursts, and that outburst is what leads to religious conflicts. Now how the right wing ideology is affecting all this is because, yeah, I will take the POI.
So you said the outbursts that can happen and can cause religious conflict in any region or any area. So that's I would like to ask you, how is this outburst attributed to only right wing ideology, whereas it can happen in any sphere, as we know,
Yeah.
or the
So
left or centrist as well? Yeah.
yeah. So to answer to the POI, what I would like to state here is that what happens is, since the majority in such a vast scale, they they are audible. They are basically, they are in control of a larger crowd. So what happens in religious conflicts is, it's basically it's one religion against the other. So in general it is that the whoever is in the majority will have an upper hand over the one who is in minority, and which is why we are saying that it happens in both the religions, where whoever is in the majority is using this conflict as a political strategy to basically gather votes. Now as the government itself says that the what happens is that the leftists or the people who do not follow right wing ideology stand behind the minority just to gather votes. The right wing does the same. It stands or it promotes whatever it is believe its customs is to gather votes. It all comes down to voting. Now what happens, why right wing wins is because, since the majority is following the right wing, what the right wing is preaching, it is easier to gather their votes, while on the leftist end they have to work for it. So that itself is what claims that I won't be taking in POs now. So that what happens is, it pushes the claim that how basically right wing ideology is leading to religious conflicts in the country. Now coming to what happens is, right wing ideology, it brainwashes people to follow or adopt a particular way of living, custom or religion, and everyone is supposed to adjust to their practices accordingly. They don't take into consideration what as an individual wants to follow, but what they do is they try to impose their customs and their beliefs and says to them that whatever we are doing, the way the customs and the things we follow, you have to follow the same. Now when you impose such a factor on people, it will hamper their mind and they will get violent and outburst at some point, because they, as you, want to prevent and follow their own customs and live life according to it. Now, to further cement our argument, I would also like to point out that since we are talking about right wing ideology, what happened when the leftist government was in power? We had a Muslim vice president as well in the cabinet, and the cabinet had many more people from other religion representing it. But since the right wing has come, there is only one cabinet minister that is of different religion, and that is the Minister of Minority Affairs. With that,
Okay.
I would like to conclude by saying that right wing ideology does lead to religious conflicts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay, with that, we end the first half of the debate. Moving on to the next part, the rebuttal round. I'd just like to give out few facts, information before we get started on with the same. Please note that the rebuttal rounds are for 4 minutes each, starting with the opposition leader and ending with the prime minister. Uh, Please note that there won't be any use of, you cannot use a point of information. There will only be a point of order or a point of privilege that can be raised. Also, please note that no new facts can be brought into light while, during the rebuttal round. All the facts that have been already introduced in the debate can only be the ones that can be brought about. With that, uh, leader of the opposition party, the floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
Give me 10 seconds, please. Yeah, I'm ready. I really think that the government was failed to actually establish the motion in the House. That was the first part where the government failed to prove its burden. Initially, the government has to come in the House and explain the entire motion, which they failed to do. They talked about different timelines. India has never had a centrist government. Again, in the later part of their speech, they called Indian National Congress as a center leftist party, again inclined towards left, again rebutting their whole points and they again rebutting their whole arguments. They talked about Muslim appeasement, that that left-wing parties are hiding behind Muslims and other religious groups to gather votes. But again, how the right-wing ideology is not leading to religious conflict, that does not show. And that does not show us. They made the entire debate majorly about right versus left, Hindu versus Muslim, NDA versus UPA. That was quite evident in their entire speeches. They talked about corruption. I don't know how it is relevant. The point of corruption is relevant in this motion itself. How the vote bank point is relevant in this respect. I don't really understand how they were able to how they were able to understand the religious conflict part, which I think they blatantly failed to do so. They talked about how good things are not shown, does not show how good things are not shown by the right wing parties. But again, how does that prove that the increase in right wing parties has not led to religious conflict? Just majorly stating their argument around that this happens each and every time. Like, whether it is a right wing party or a left wing party, religious conflicts happen. But that was not the motion of the House. The motion of the House states that the government has to refute the claim that the increase in right wing ideology is leading to religious conflict. So the burden of the government was to prove that the increase in right wing ideology is not leading to religious conflict, which they blatantly failed to do so. Their member of government came here and said that the prime minister went to the Ram Lalla Janambhoomi Pujan. Again, it is the very basis of a democracy that state cannot be a party to any religion. There should be least involvement of a particular or any religion in the politics of a country. That is the defining step of a democracy, which our prime minister of our country blatantly failed. He went to a place that represented a particular religion. That shows that he has a soft corner for religion. again their lead their the someone from the government talked about how Christians have a say in Mizoram politics. Sir, I'm really sorry to say that you just proved our point. We were saying that the right wing ideology, that is the religious conservatism, is, if having a say in the politics, leads to a very disoriented and unstable religious conflict among the people of the nation. That is the further consequence of Mizoram that particular state will be facing in the future, because people from a particular religion have a say in that religion. That was the entire premise of the most of the debate that the opposition was trying to establish, and by your various speeches you have proved the entire premise of the opposition. The major point of clash that I could identify in the debate among the government side and the opposition side was that the government tried to prove that religious clashes happen in every sort of the government. First point to this is, first of all, that was not the burden that you need to prove that religious conflicts happen in all sorts of government. You had to prove that the rising right ideology does not lead to religious conflict. The second point is, just to rebut them in this regard, why reports by famous publishing house like Amnesty and other showing that the current government, from the time the current government has come to
Understood, I'm
power.
really sorry. I'm really sorry. The time is up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I will just conclude in the next 10 seconds.
Uh, no, I'm really sorry.
Okay,
We have to
thank
stop
you.
at that point because
Point of personal privilege.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
Can a point of order be raised against the previous speech because the speaker? Okay. Against the member of opposition speech.
Against the member of opposition, no,
I
you
don't think
Yeah,
so.
he spoke
I
previously.
think
Okay. No.
we'll rebut that. That's fine.
no. I'm really sorry, participant. But thank you. Points have been noted. Is there a point of personal privilege or a point of order that you would want to raise, opponent team? Okay, fine. With that, we move on to the final speaker. Prime Minister, the floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. Can the proposition start?
Yeah, you can start.
So the opposition not only misinterpreted but manipulated the argument of the proposition to make it look like we were saying something that we were not. Let us come to the prime argument, the first argument that was raised about the Tanishq ad. I would like to ask, is any of the member of the opposition a psychologist that they can make a correlation between a right-wing ideology and people taking a simple ad, blowing it out of proportion? Was there any direct involvement of the government? And if there was, why did they not provide proof to the committee today? This is the first question that we would like to ask. The second thing that we would like to ask is that if our argument was so flawed, then why did you not give the reasons of why it was flawed rather than just stating that it was flawed? Coming to the fact, you rebutted the point about Mizoram and how it's right wing, but that example was of the time of Congress that was leading. So that proves our point that it is not only the right wing governments, but even when the so-called centrist government like Congress was in power, there were religious conflicts happening, and that is why that example was given. The next thing that we need to understand is that the opposition talked about how the minority is always oppressed in a right wing form of government. That argument is completely flawed for the reason as simple as this: even industrialists or the richest of the rich in a country are a minority, but certain times they are not the ones that are being oppressed. Rather, they are the ones that oppress, and not only in a radical form of a government, but even a centrist or a leftist form of government. And the reason we mentioned unity and why we mentioned that it leads to consolidation is because unlike centrist or leftist, there is a notion of unity among the people so that they can move ahead of just religious conflicts and focus on bigger things about growth, about healthy competition with other countries rather than just fighting among themselves. This is something that the opposition has completely failed to realize. The next thing we want to highlight is that India does not follow the Western form of secularism, and that India always interfered with religion. the Indian government always interfered, and this was something that was also highlighted by the member of the parliament, how the Hindu laws, the Muslim laws, and even the Parsi laws were changed. So that is not just with the right wing, but with every form of government. Now, coming to the fact, it's a pure coincidence. And now coming to the fact about how our prime minister went to visit that place and how it shows the biasness. One that cannot be said directly because of one reason, that was completely out of respect, considering the fact that a motion was passed, a legal motion was passed by the Supreme Court of India, and it was actually a victory for the Indian nation as a whole, considering that justice was served in a long drawn out process. The papers were of which were over 1,000 pages long, and this was not just biasness towards one religion, but a long drawn out legal process that was followed by the country. What we would like to say is that the opposition repeatedly stated how our argument was flawed, but did not highlight how it was flawed. They said again and again that right wing politics lead to corruption, they lead to violence, but they did not give any examples of when it has led to violence. They did not give any reasons as to why it led to violence. And so, as my partner said about Hindutva, it is not related to right wing ideology. That is a complete misinterpretation. It is just about pride in being Hindu. It is not a competition against any other religion. And this is something that you have manipulated in the committee to make it look like we are being biased towards one side. That is not the case. We are providing the true image of what something really is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay, fine. With that, we move on to the end of the debate. It was a well drawn out debate. I'm pretty sure the judge has a lot of suggestions and feedback to give regarding the same.
Just give me a couple of minutes. Let me just.
Rishabh, when will be the verdict announced?
Today, end of evening, to say, around 6:30, we'll announce it.
Cool.
It was a good debate, everyone. It was good debating.
Right. So thank you guys. It was a very good debate. And I'm not going to sugarcoat my comments on this debate. So let me start with the proposition team. So first, I'll just give a generic view of what I thought about the debate, and then maybe go into each speaker's points. So first, the right-wing ideology was not clearly defined by team proposition, which is expected, because terms like right-wing, liberalism, secularism are Western concepts, and when used in Indian context, it is important to define what it means, and that was not done. Right away, the Prime Minister delved into the jumped into the arguments with examples. And again, even in the case of the arguments that was put forth by the Prime Minister and subsequently by the member of the government, I felt the speech, or rather the arguments, were very anecdotal in nature, which is not what you expect in a debate. You don't want someone to come and speak something which is anecdotal, more out of personal experience, rather than solid facts, which was the case in a lot of instances. To the contrary, I did feel that team opposition did a good job in defining what right-wing is. And also a lot of people in India make the mistake of restricting right-wing ideology to just Hindus, whereas the scope extends to all religions as well, which is good to see. And also they did point out that team proposition did not define what right-wing ideology is. And second, I think team proposition misunderstood the motion, because I felt like they were debating throughout about why right-wing governments are better than left-wing governments, and not necessarily why right-wing ideology leads to religious conflicts. They didn't argue against that. So there were a lot of instances where relevant arguments were presented because of this. I don't know if it was something because they interpreted the motion in this manner, or it was just something which they lost track of as the argument proceeded. But this was the case. And a lot of point of order opportunities was missed as well throughout. I did make a note of a few of them. Like, for example, team opposition said that India has only one minority minister right now, whereas India has more than one minority minister. It also has a Sikh minister, if I'm not wrong. His name is Hardeep Singh Puri, which could have been pointed out by team proposition. I think they just gave the example of Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi, the Minister of Minority Affairs. Also, there were a couple of other point of order opportunities which were missed. And I felt maybe more point of information could have been raised as well from both sides. But apart from that, now if to go into each particular speaker's arguments. So yeah, to begin with, the Prime Minister, I think it was stated that the premise of this argument was that religious conflicts have existed forever and has nothing to do with right-wing governments. But again, as stated earlier, the argument is not about whether right-wing governments and left-wing governments, but whether about right-wing ideology leads to religious conflicts. Even when there's a left-wing or centrist government in power, right-wing ideology can lead to conflicts, which is again well pointed out by team opposition. And again, I did not feel there was any constructive argument in the speech because largely it is very anecdotal and a lot of examples were given. Again, these examples were not backed by solid evidence. Random numbers like 50 incidents in a population of 130 crore was mentioned, which in a debate you expect, especially when there was time for preparation, you expect for more detailed statistics with evidence from, where you're quoting this from, which was not the case. And yeah, I think this was largely it. And then examples of Make in India, Swachh Bharat, corruption were given as examples of good right-wing role, which was completely irrelevant to the argument. And yeah, I think this is something which you'll have to take note of when you're in a debate next time. Preparation is very important, and especially when you're the first speaker, it is important for you to define the motion, because especially such a topic where there is a lot of scope for it to be misinterpreted in a lot of ways, it is important for you to clearly define what the topic is and then proceed with the arguments. Otherwise, sometimes even the judge can be left confused as to what you're trying to say. And yeah, I think this was largely it in terms of the first speaker. I think the leader of opposition defined religious conflict well, and he also spoke about conservatism, where he defined it as prefers to maintain social order and don't like change. I mean, not related to the debate, but there's a definition which I wouldn't agree with, because I don't think conservatives are against change. They're against radical change, but they are for gradual change. Definitely, they prefer to maintain social order because right-wing ideology or conservatism arises from the notion that the world has arrived at where it is today after a period of trial and error, and there is some validity to the existing structures which we have, which is why they're against radical change and prefer gradual change. So yeah, again, this was something which could have been harped on by the team proposition and argued against, but that was not done. And it was good to see that the opposition did point out I think leader of opposition spoke about secularism, but they rightly pointed out about how secularism in a Western context doesn't apply to India, which is good to see. I think it was the member of government who did that. Yeah, and then I think apart from that, leader of opposition, I largely thought, your arguments were well structured and there was a flow, and it was also good to see that not just in terms of content, but also in terms of strategy about how you want to structure your arguments. I felt it was a good flow between you and the member of opposition. And in a debate, I think three most important things are style of debate, your content, and the strategy in which you develop the arguments. And I thought in most cases you tick the box, which is very good. Yeah, and there was an example of Tanushka. And just one thing though, again, this is a point of order which could have been picked up when giving the example of right-wing ideologies followed creates unrest. Mughal Empire was cited. I don't know if monarchy can be cited as a monarchy government can be cited as an example of right-wing governments, because right-wing ideology itself, which came from the thinkers in the 18th and 17th century, originated more so in the context of political order rather than monarchy itself.
May I?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so the right wing ideology and the left wing ideology stemmed itself, rooted itself from the French Revolution, where the right wing ideology wanted monarchy in the terms of politics there, and the left wing wanted democracy there.
That was in terms of maintaining the existing social order, and French Revolution in itself is not a left-wing movement. French Revolution, in fact, which a lot of people don't know, is that was a right-wing ideology where people wanted. The only difference was it was a right-wing ideology in the extreme sense, like how in the case of India, you can maybe cite the example of the Indian National Army, which was founded by Subhash Chandra Bose, because even that was a right-wing government in nature in terms of their beliefs, but again, it was very extremist in nature in terms of they wanted to completely do away with the existing
So,
structure.
so the right wing ideology, I just want a bit of clarification from you, since you are more experienced than me, obviously. So, the right wing ideology focuses on three aspects basically: the conservative nature, the nationalist nature, and the republic nature. Now, the Indian National Congress largely stemmed itself on the Indian National Army, led by Subhash Chandra Bose, largely stemmed itself on the nationalist aspect of the right wing ideology. But the current government and the Mughal Empire was basically stemming itself on the social conservatism aspect. So my question is that whether whatever I spoke was right or wrong.
Um, Generally, right wing, left wing is a term which is used in the context of political orders. And yes, there is, you can say to a certain extent, some aspects of governments which were led by religious orders or through monarchies. Some aspects of it is claimed by the right wing ideology, but I will not attribute an entire a structure of monarchy to a right wing government. Which yes, Nazi Germany is understandable, but not Mughal Empire. I don't think it falls under the broad definition of it. People can disagree, but I don't think it falls, and I don't think most people would agree that you can define a monarchy as a right wing or left wing. But yeah, apart from that, you gave the example of exiles, Kashmiri Pandits to prove the point that right wing ideology is not restricted to one community, which is good to see. But yeah, largely, I think it was a good set of constructive arguments from your point of view. And then member of government, as stated earlier, you did define secularism well, and why that was not relevant in the context of how the leader of opposition stated it. But there was a self-defeating argument which you made, and I think after that you sort of lost track of what you were saying. You gave the example of Mizoram right-wing ideology, Christianity, how they force the candidates to get permission from them before they can stand elections. And in a way, that was a self-defeating argument because you were speaking in favor of the notion that right-wing ideology does lead to religious conflict, which was also pointed out by team opposition. Yes, you defined Hindutva as a geographic identity. Again, this was point of order which could have been raised because Savarkar defined the term Hindu as a geographical identity and not Hindutva. And there's a big difference between the two, even though it's just a matter of 3 letters. And yeah, and then you again, as was the case of the Prime Minister, you also spoke about how right-wing governments came into power, as seen in Europe and India, and leftist and central governments have created a sense of disillusion amongst people, which it can be debated on whether it is right or wrong. But the thing is, it was not relevant to the argument over here. Is my point. And again, Ram Janmabhoomi, whether the PM has the right to go wherever he wants. There could have been more clarity on why you say that, because in a secular state, I think a prime minister does have the right to go wherever he wants. And you stated that, and when the opposition did counter it, it could have been rebutted. It wasn't. And yeah, I think overall it was a good argument, but because of the fact that it was not well defined by the opening speaker of your team, your content or your arguments lacked a structure or coherence throughout. And that is something which you'll have to keep in mind when you debate next time. And again, the member of opposition did point out a lot of, before going into the arguments, he pointed out some of the logical fallacies, which was the case of some arguments, the government side. And I think the arguments again were good, and there was a good structure which was followed, and there was a good flow from the first speech. And yeah, I think overall it was good. Again, as stated earlier, there was just this one point of order which could have been pointed out by team proposition, which wasn't. Rebuttal, I think the leader of opposition did a very good job. He had noted most things which team proposition had said and counted them well. Whereas in the case of the prime minister who rebutted the speech for team proposition, I again felt it was very anecdotal. And there were something about psychologists making correlation between taking down of an Aaron government, and the argument was flawed. The minority oppressed, there were a lot of very generic statements thrown around, and without proper evidence or something to back up what you were saying. And you said that team opposition did not give reasons as to why right-wing governments lead to conflicts, and you said they did not give examples of this, examples of that, but in reality they did give examples of these if you did pay attention to the speech. And yeah, I think this is something I also noticed in your first speech. You were very anecdotal, and which was also mentioned. So I think this is something which you have to keep in mind when you debate next time. Otherwise, I think, otherwise I thought the debate was overall very good. Both teams were quite robust in their beliefs and why they thought this was better than the other. But yeah, I think overall I did enjoy the debate as well, and I hope you learned something as well. So yeah, it's good that we had some extra time to speak.
Can you elaborate a bit on what the opposition side could have done more in order to have the debate with a much larger margin of victory? Is there anything that by when you were reading the motion of the debate, there was anything that you were expecting out of the opposition and which we didn't actually fulfill your?
What I expected, especially with this particular motion, was that there is a lot of room for interpretation, and there is no clear definition of any of these terms anywhere, and people can choose to interpret them in the manner they want. And in such a case, it is very important for you to clearly define, and the argument should flow from that definition. Otherwise, there's a lot of room for it to be rebutted or said this is wrong, because this is a very open motion which can be interpreted in a lot of ways. And so it was good that you defined. That is something which I was looking for. And again, one more thing which I was very conscious of, whether people are going to restrict right-wing ideology just to Hinduism, because that's what tends to happen in a country like India, where right-wing ideology or conservatism is directly related with Hindu nationalism or conservatism, which is not the case. There are also Christian conservative parties in India, in places like Goa, Mizoram. There are Muslim conservative parties in Hyderabad, Jammu and Kashmir. So yeah, it was good that you did point that out as well. I think largely the points were good. If I have to state anything, yes, maybe you can like in some instances, I think in the flow of the speech, certain things were thrown around here and there without proper evidence, or which was not factually right, which you can be conscious of next time. But again, given the topic, I think it is bound to happen. But yeah, I think largely it was good. I mean, if you do go on to the next round, I would say just stick to what you're doing, and like what you did today, have good content. And also it is very important to have a good structure, because it is very easy, when a judge is listening to 4 people speaking for about 30 or 45 minutes, it is quite easy for him to get lost. And when there is a coherent structure, it makes that much easier for him or her to remember what is being said. So that is something which I think you did well, and you should continue doing, irrespective of what the motion is. But yeah, I think otherwise I don't have anything else to say. I think you guys did a very good job.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is there anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I think that would be all.
So, there's one thing I need to clarify. Just need to clarify that the reason I stated those policies was to strengthen my argument that. I'll explain my argument. I don't think I was really clear in that.
I don't think so. You can explain your argument now.
No, just
it's okay. I mean, yeah, it's not going to count as
formally. Yeah, it's not good. I
Okay,
don't
sure.
even want it to. I just want to tell you.
Okay, just a second. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you in the middle.
Can I
Rishabh,
just
I'm
point
having-
out something?
Rishabh, I'm having an exam and I'll just take a leave from here.
Yeah, you guys
Okay.
can
Thank
go
you,
on.
thank you, thank you.
is being classified as disturbed, there is a timely review of said situation mandated from time to time to see if this classification may still apply to the said region. So now, once we have defined what a disturbed area is, let us see who may make such a clarification. The governor of the state where the such unrest is occurring, or the elected central government. I would like to clarify that the army may not unilaterally classify any state or region as disturbed on their own. Now that we have clarified on what the extraordinary situation contribute to a region being classified as disturbed and who the people are who may call into force ASFA, let us see what powers ASFA grants the army. Stop and search a suspect vehicle, arrest someone without a warrant, and fire on people who are acting in contravention of the law. They may also destroy suspicious hideouts or arms dumps where they feel that they may be attacked upon. And lastly, they are provided legal immunities from the said above action, but they may be prosecuted if the central government provides them sanction. Now, my opponents may argue that such action seem to be infringing on the liberty of the local residents, and they may be concerned about something called human rights. But now let's first see why ASFA is required. As I've already mentioned, there is a war-like situation in the region. Second, urban militancy, unlike open ground warfare, has civilians in the battleground. And at times you need to take split-second decisions. And this split second may be the difference of life and death, not only for the army person, but for countless civilians around them. Third, armed forces have special training in threat identification, quick response, and controlled aggression with deadly weapons. So when they make a decision, it cannot be weighed down by procedural hurdles and bureaucracy, which we are used to in civil society. The rules and processes which are applicable in a normal civil society have no place in a battlefield. And my friends, let us no, thank you. And let us be very clear that this is a battlefield. We would also like to draw some attention to the success of some of the successes this act has brought. Namely, Assam's security situation has improved largely, and we do not have Alpha and other groups have been decimated, and the potential for revival doesn't look great at all. Second, the quelling of the Khalistan movement in Punjab and Chandigarh, which and subsequent withdrawal of the act from these regions. Now, my friends in the opposition are going to say that nobody should be given absolute power, and people in power make mistakes. I would like to remind them the protection under Section 7 of this Act is not available to a member who commits an act which constitutes as a criminal offense in discharge of his official duty, even if he is in said disturbed area. And to prove this, there are some examples of how army officers have been prosecuted. For example, the conviction of 5 servicemen to life imprisonment for the Mashal fake encounter case, 2 soldiers of the Rashtriya Rifle being subject to 10 years of rigorous imprisonment for rape, and the 129 service persons who have been punished, including 38 officers, 12 JCOs, and 79 jawans. So can we wash our hands? No, thank you. Can we wash our hands and say that, hey, everything is fine and nothing is wrong? I know the government recognizes that there has been abuse of privileges. Pursuant to the 2016 Supreme Court ruling, which has ended the immunity of the armed forces, we welcome further investigation into violations which may bring forward the misconduct of a few, I repeat, a few bad apples, which are polluting the great name and respect our army enjoys. It will be our endeavor to set up a special commission with independent oversight to only assist the army in deciphering which cases merit further attention. Now, I would, while with this, I would like to end my speech with 3 questions to the opposition. First, can they deny that China, Pakistan, and other militant groups indulge in active propaganda in border areas to deliberately stir up the local population? Second, can we assume that the local area will return to its normal state without the heavy deployment of our armed forces in this region? And that my third question is, if you answer yes to the first 2 questions, my third question to you is, can you, my dear friends, tell me with clarity that the many benefits that ASFA brings far outweighs the risk and some of the abuses which has happened? If the answer is no, I think you will find it in your conscience to side with the government and help us in passing of this motion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay. With that, we move on to the next speaker, the leader of the opposition party. The floor is all yours. You can present whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Three things going to do in my speech. First of all, understanding a deeper understanding of what disturbed area looks like with giving real examples, better example than what the government told you. Second, what these insurgent groups look like, and tell you why this insurgency happens in the first place, right? And my second speaker is going to talk about some good alternatives and normalcy without AFSPA, right? First of all, what these disturbed area look like. The government conveniently tells, okay, look, these are areas where there's a war-like situation, public order can't be there, so we just bring in the army. This is not true. These disturbed areas are these border districts, like Kashmir, like this northeast, which are bound by many countries, right, around us. They have been neglected. They are seeing a lot of insurgencies, and it's a very chronic and an endemic condition. Gujarat is a bordering nation, but it does not have insurgency. There are some problems that the government is neglecting the northeast, which have stirred these insurgencies. Second, these northeast states have a very rich culture of tribals and forests, and they have their own traditions, dressing, and languages. Understanding what these insurgent groups look like they give the example of Khalistan. Like that's not a properly called, like that can't be say like an insurgent group in a disturbed area. We do agree that he wanted, like Bindrawala wanted political font, but these insurgent groups thrive on more people supporting them. That is to say, they thrive on government failures of not providing them enough resources, so that these insurgent groups, even the leader, if it's political, it's going to bring in a lot of civilians. Why does insurgency happen? This is the most important thing. First of all, it's discontent between the state and the central government. Example, in Mizoram, while it was the part of Assam, it experienced militancy after the union government and Assamese government failed to provide assistance to the Mizo people during the Motam famine. The second reason why insurgencies happen, it is because the indigenous population feel their culture is being under threat. Example, in the present day state of Mizoram, when it was like the part of Assam in 1960, the Assamese government imposed Assamese as the official language without any consideration for these Mizo languages. Just understand what these tribal people will feel, right? So this has led to succession movement led by the Mizo National Front, which is a separatist and a insurgent organization in a disturbed area, right? Thirdly, when the tribals feel that their area and identity is being eroded. For example, it's about the failure of the government to remove, I'll take it later, failure of the government to remove these Bangladeshi immigrants from these northeast. For example, in Tripura, insurgent groups started to form in the end of 1970, and because the ethnic tension between the Bengali immigrants and tribal population increase, right? In Assam, we have the United Liberation Front of Assam, which actually wanted to counter these foreign immigration taking away their jobs, right? Thirdly, this Assam and Tripura example tell us that these tribals were forced to resort to arm in order to protect their own culture, get jobs, etc. Right? Fourthly, this insurgency happened because of the failed integration and a sense of Indianness among tribal population. For example, due to lack of investment from the Indian government, which has led to a widespread poverty. These insurgent leaders can easily now recruit people because these people come in exchange for the money, right? Thirdly, this underdevelopment leads to people being disconnected from the Indian mainland. Okay, coming to my last point, it's the most important point on why AFSPA will lead to more insurgency, less stability, right? First of all, the law itself disproportionately affects normal civilians. The Prime Minister lies when he says that, look, in the section 7, we have this. No, in the section 6, it says that no prosecution or other legal suit shall lie against the army man without the sanction from the central government when he acts according to law. I'll take it later. What does acting according to law mean in the AFSPA? in the AFSPA, acting according to the law means using brute force, using force to even open fire to maintain public order, right? Any person contravening the law. This is given in the third section. It also prohibits assembly of more than 5 people. Like, so for example, if section 144 of CRPC have been imposed on them. So what does this finally lead to? Ministry of Home Affairs themselves told that from 1992 to 2015, 15,600 fatalities have occurred because in these regions. Does the government seriously think that this is just all of those are just killings which are correct by just giving 5 examples of army men which are prosecuted? I'll tell you 10 terrorists which are prosecuted. Is the government ready to decriminalize UAPA? No, I'll not take it right now. Right. Coming to this point of immunity to the army, right? So what does this lead to? First of all, I've told you how the civilians are disproportionately affected because of this immense power the AFPA Act has, right? Next, these civilians don't even have the remedy of justice because you need to get a sanction from the central government, which is itself for first time the central government imposed these areas disturbed areas. Why would the central government freely want to prosecute this army, right? They'll just allow them to go with the free will, right? Second, AFSPA encourages brute force in an area, and the area almost forever remains disturbed. Why is this true? The government using this act will shrug away from its responsibility of tackling the root causes of insurgencies. Due to this, the status of this area, it being disturbed, it receives no tourism, no foreign investment, and as well as local investment. There is mental trauma to the citizens, which makes them leave job. They even have to go under physical trauma, concluding in 10 seconds. These civilians will distrust the government even more, feel alienated rather than join an insurgent group, and then AFPA will not be able to eliminate the insurgency. With that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay. With that, we move on to the next speaker, the member of government. Whenever you're ready, floor is all yours.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the opposition has in many ways pointed out the root cause for militancy. They have said how we need to find other ways to stop militancy. We have, the government has not included the people. Well, let me say at the outset that the root cause of militancy is, in fact, a vacuum for governance. But let me also be clear that the people who are filling this vacuum are people who actually advocate for an armed overthrow of the Indian Republic. Take a look at the Maoists, take a look at their ideology. They are not peaceable people. They want the forcible overthrow of the republic as it's established in our constitution. They are not people who we can work with. Let's be very clear about that. And we also hear about how the government is not investing in certain areas. Well, the opposition should know that places like Kashmir have been the beneficiary of incredible investment from the center. They have received a very great deal of investment. But despite this, it is the fact of uh, lack of private sector economic activity which has held them back. And the direct cause for this uh, economic lack of economic activity is the ongoing militancy in this area. Let us be clear that the political work and the economic work of inclusion of marginalized communities can happen only after the militancy in these areas is eliminated. It does not come before. And while there may be some people who we can work with, I might come in the end, towards the end of my speech for the POI. While there may be groups that the government may be able to co-opt into the mainstream, and indeed we have. I mean, there are autonomous councils in Mizoram where the tribes who live in the hills have signed agreements with the central government, and they work with the blessing of the law as their autonomous regions. But these must be distinguished clearly from groups like ULFA, as the Prime Minister mentioned, whose actual ideology is to overthrow the government. Their ideology is not to seek the autonomy of their own people, it is to overthrow the established order. This is something that we cannot accept and we must completely reject. uh, as for the point that the opposition mentioned, that AFSPA is actually promoting militancy. Well, let me tell him quite plainly that every policy of the government is going to invite a reactionary reaction. Everything. There is no policy in any system of polity that is not going to invite opposition. That does not mean we accept everything that the opposition says to any policy says. I mean, some of the best policies that have been implemented in the country or anywhere in the world have invited immediate reactionary opposition from political opportunists. We cannot make way for opportunism in what we do. I Okay, yes, I'll take your point of information.
You have told that all policies have an opposition. Do agree to that, but understand that if a economic policy is destroying the economy of the nation, you can't then call that opposition. It's a failure of the policy. If AFSPA is promoting disturbed areas, instability, it's not like an opposition, it's a failure.
Well, let me. OFSPA, as the Prime Minister has mentioned, has succeeded in eliminating the Khalistani opposition in Punjab. Not the opposition, I mean the Khalistani militancy in Punjab. Let me say clearly that there have been successes. The Ulfa is almost completely gone. There are other militants in the Bangladesh border that have been brought down. The Maoists, principally, who have received a great deal of support from China. And as a result, their aim is not to work within the framework of the Indian Republic and Constitution, but their aim is to overthrow the Indian Republic. The Maoists have been crushed thanks to AFSPA. So it's not that there is no success at all. That is very, very far from the truth. There have been a great deals of successes as far as curbing militancy is concerned. Secondly, I think I should clarify that the purpose of AFSPA is not development. That is, it is to make way for development. Only once there is peace can we actually have economic activity and the political work of integration into the mainstream that is flourishing. But to start the essential work, we must first clear the area of these wrongdoers, and that's really where AFSPA is essential. And our failure to root out elements like the Maoists, Ulfa, these people, we must be clear, cannot be co-opted into the mainstream, and our failure to break them or to cripple them is in no way in the best interests of the peoples of this area. Thank you.
Okay. Points have been noted. Is there a point of order or a point of personal privilege which the opposition team would like to raise?
Personal privilege.
Go ahead.
Does the second speaker from the government side have any time left?
Yeah, he has a minute left.
Can the chair kindly ask if they're open to POIs?
After the 5th minute, you cannot ask for POIs.
Actually, Sumer yesterday told that you can yield your remaining time to
time to POIs if he wishes to.
It's the judge call.
No, POIs will not be entertained.
Okay, that's fine.
Afterward, yeah.
Okay. With that, we move on to the 4th speaker. The member of the opposition party. The floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
Am I clearly audible?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take 20 seconds. Yep. 3, 2, 1. Panel, there is a dire need of bringing in a humane perspective in this debate. This debate is not about national integrity or the morale of armed forces. This debate is about who takes into account the gross violation of human rights of people. It's about the absolute immunity that is provided to these armed forces, and it's about high time how we change it. The risk of abuse is inherent in these provisions, and it's further heightened by an all-embracing immunity, which the military officials are covered under. The point to be understood is that when you give them a lot of immunity to misuse their powers, you are perpetuating conflict and not really removing conflict from the disturbed area. And that's why we here as the opposition are proud to propose some constructives. First, moving on with the fact that the PM conveniently brushes under as human rights violations. Now, what I need you to understand is that these human rights violations that they conveniently are brushing under is something that needs to be taken into consideration of. There's been a vast majority of literature that's supporting the fact that there's been many people who have been a victim of this. There have been arrests and deaths of Miss Tangamam Manjora Devi on 11 July. The 32-year-old was arrested and the body was completely ridiculed with bullets. It was mutilated and it was given back. What did the Army Vice Chief of Staff explain? He was unfortunate. He said that the incident was unfortunate. There have been many other cases of violence, absolute gross misusage of their power, violation of the usage of their power. The proposition conveniently says that if you have a problem, you can challenge it and you can, have a very healthy political discourse. What I need them to understand is there have been multiple families who have challenged these, who have challenged the denial of sanctions. There have been families of Mansoor Ahmad Mir, who was taken away in 2003, was believed to be killed. There have been Ashik Hussain, who was tortured to death in custody. There have been Javed, Mansoor family, and there have been gross violation of Article 14 of the Constitution. And there's been no response by the Union of India in the court since, and there's been no hearing. That's what you need to take into consideration. When the PM conveniently brushes by saying that, hey, the complaints are being taken into consideration of, they also need to understand that 96% of the complaints lodged are not really being taken into consideration altogether. This is a report by Amnesty International. Forget that. If the chair does not want to consider Amnesty International as an organization that you want to listen to, let's for a moment consider that our own National Human Rights Council or our own Supreme Court is passing this as something that's not really helping in removing conflict altogether. When Miss Irom Sharmila had taken this as a very big point to be taken into consideration, and the Prime Minister had said that okay, back in 2004, that okay, this needs to be considered and a Supreme Court committee needs to be set up. A Jeevan Reddy committee was set up, but the point is, the committee, quote unquote, said that the act is too sketchy, it's too bald and quite inadequate in several particulars. The report further added that the perception that's gathered by its members during the course of its finding is that the act, for whatever reason, has become a symbol of oppression, a symbol of hate, an instrument of discrimination against high-heartedness. But the government has remained silent for nearly over a decade, despite the recommendations from its own Supreme Court, from its own judicial system. It's not just the Jeevan Reddy Committee, it's not just the International Court of Justice, it's not just the Amnesty International, it's not just the Asia Watch that have implored the government of India time and again to scrap this draconian law. It's India's civil administration, and we have essentially become a casualty of bureaucratic inertia. And that's what we need to remove. Moving on to the second constructive is that giving unwarranted immunity is not how you solve conflict. If you're giving unwarranted immunity and also the PM conveniently says that 5 army officers had been prosecuted. If there's a POI on the floor, please unmute yourself.
Ma'am, when you say that it's become a symbol of hate, do you not advocate that forces should be deployed in the region? And do you also not agree with the point that they need to act in the split second? Thank you.
That does not mean that you're allowed to grossly violate the human rights of people, the human rights of civilians who are involved. If there is a problem, there are multiple ways to solve that problem. There is political discourse. There were 6 political parties in Kashmir. The political uprising was being equally dealt in a very healthy manner with healthy, proper political discourse. But that wasn't really, when you have the Defense Enactment Act, when you have the DDA, when you can have certain acts, certain laws in certain areas, why have the ASPA AFSPA Act in the entire state altogether? Why have it in so many multiple states? And the point is that your deputy PM conveniently mentions that the purpose of AFSPA is to lead for development. Then is to clear the ground for development. If that's the case, then why are you not highlighting the fact that there have been multiple instances when the state government has said that, hey, our area is not really disturbed anymore, but it's the central government that takes it into power. It's the central government that sends the troops, and it's the central government that extends the AFSPA. You need to understand that it's a one-man rule happening and the violation needs to be taken into consideration. What do we give you on our side of the house? We give you better policies. We give you better deeds. We give you better solutions. Political discourse can solve everything. Gross counter-violence is never the answer. With that, I'd like to end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, participants, after the 5-minute mark, you cannot raise a POI, so we won't be taking it into consideration.
I have
That's
a point of order.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to know, except the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which are the state government had advocated removal of ASPA.
Judge?
You need to come up
Yeah.
with that again.
My basic point was that except the state of Jammu and Kashmir, there was the word government, state governments. I feel that it is state government, not government. So I feel it's only the state of Jammu and Kashmir that had advocated the removal of ASPA and not government. So I'd like the chair to note that.
Thank you.
Okay.
The point of order is under consideration, but it does feel like in this case it could have just been something which happened in the flow of the conversation rather than intentional. But yes, the order was under consideration.
Okay. With that, we come to the first half. We end the first half of the debate. Moving on to the rounds of rebuttal, there are a few rules which I would like to notify both the teams of. One, note that both the teams have 4 minutes each. Both the presenters have 4 minutes each to present. There won't be a point of information that can be raised during a rebuttal round. That can only be a point of order or a point of personal privilege that can be raised during a rebuttal round. Also, note that no new facts can be brought to light under the rebuttal round. All the facts that's already been stated in the purview of the debate are the only facts that can be brought up during the rounds of rebuttal. With that, we can start with the leader of the opposition party. The floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
He's going to start in 10 seconds, if that's all right.
Sorry, am I visible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a second. Okay. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Pointing out some problems with the government's case. First of all, the second speaker told that there is no peace deal possible because these people are just very violent. They don't want to do a peace deal. However, let me bring you to the fact that this is factually incorrect. Where Mizoram in 1986, their Mizoram, the MNF, which I talked about in my first speech, actually sat with the government for a peace deal in 1986. Therefore, peace deals are completely possible. It's just that the government is highly complacent, does not want political discourse, wants to silence all the dissent in the name of this AFSPA, that we are facing all of these problems, right? First of all, they are saying that let's go with peace first and then go with economic development. Let me clarify that they have not come up with substantive arguments as to why this is more likely to happen. I have told you why the very root of this insurgency are these economic issues. Understand what's the context of this debate. This debate's not just it predates independence. During the independence, while the independence, when the Assam was being added to India, there was insurgency started, right? There even like their insurgency started because those people were neglected from a long time, right? So I have told you why economic importance, economic is going to be happening first, because that's what the root cause of this problem is, right? Second, the prime minister tells us why, okay, look, this is a battlefield, this is a war-like situation, and then gives the example of Khalistan. Understand, Khalistan was more like a political movement. It was not a battleground. It was definitely not a war-like situation. I don't think the opposition knows what a war-like situation is, what a real insurgency of the Northeast is, where people have arms in their hand, they come out the roads, they kill people, right? They do not know what insurgency is. It's like this just like saying that, oh look, Khalistan movement was eradicated, so look, AFPA is very good just because AFPA was somehow used in Punjab, right? Look, let's understand let's understand how economic growth will be better on our side of the house. Because if you constantly lay down an area as disturbed, even though they say, look, it can be reviewed after 6 months, no, it has not been reviewed, right? The government is being complacent. Like there have been ASPA laws that have been in place for like tens and 15s of years, right? What does this lead to? This leads to lack of the foreign investment, which I talked about. How people will not like to invest in these like in these areas altogether. There will be no tourism. There will be no economic development for these areas, right? Thirdly, what my second speaker talked about is how it's going to hurt the civilians more, because this gross human rights violation. India is being called out by foreign organizations, right? Now, it also hurts the civilian because of granting this great immunity to the army person. What does this lead to for the civilian? First of all, he gets mental trauma. He does not want to do his job. He's jobless, right? What he's now going to do? He's rather going to join the insurgents and help them and maybe get even money for his job, rather than to go at the job, because now he hates the government. The government has kept that area in 10 years for darkness. The person would more likely to join an insurgent group, because the influence of these insurgent groups are more. And even if you eliminate like the leader, I seriously doubt that will be removing the insurgency altogether, because now multiple leaders will be formed, because you are putting this AFSA for 10 years, multiple leaders can come up in that time, right? Okay, so what are some like easy alternatives out, right? I talked about how peace deal can be successful. It's like, look, if India is being called out by foreign organizations, these people, like the foreign companies, will not like to invest in India. They'll keep away from India, because we are constantly declaring every another region as disturbed, right? In that case, you will not have foreign investment. The local people will like move into a perpetual cycle where they have mental trauma, they leave jobs, they join insurgency, and they have no like insurgency, more disturbed area, no foreign investment. It will be completely devastated area. Hence, we clearly win this debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Points have been noted. Would the opponent team like to raise for a point of order or a point of personal privilege? Okay. With that, we move on to the final speaker for the debate. Prime Minister, the floor is all yours. You can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like, as I mentioned in my speech, I see that the opposition has left unanswered the three questions which I had asked them. And in answering those three questions, I shall explain why the government stance is justified and why we take this debate. My leader of opposition said that, and even the member of opposition said repeatedly that political discourse is the way forward, and that is how we will solve it. In the first minute of my speech, I explained why when political discourse breaks down, that is when ASFA is invoked. It is not invoked, as they said, on a whim or a fancy. It is not invoked when there is political discourse and peace deals being signed and people are at a table. That is not when the army is called in. Army is called in when police people are under fire, they are not able to control militancy, and then there is this warlike situation. They refuse to understand that there was a warlike situation. The army is there, that's why the situation doesn't appear warlike. They have to be there in power to maintain the peace. It is very simple. When there is a conflict going on, the minute you remove the army, what is going to happen? They have mentioned so many points about the root causes of insurgency, and we are saying yes, there are root causes of insurgency, and we do not disagree with the root causes of insurgency. But I would like to remind them that when dialogues failed, when people took up arms, and when they came against the government and the local administration over there, They killed people, they killed innocent people. That is when the army was deployed. When the situation got progressively worse, that is when ASFA was deployed. And they failed to recognize the situation, saying that we are not exploring other options. I asked them the second question. Do you think that those situations would stabilize if I remove the army tomorrow? And I'm sure the answer will remain no. You remove the army tomorrow from Kashmir, what is going to happen? There is propaganda from Pakistan. Can you remove the army? No. If the army is to stay there, do they not require the ability to take a split-second decision? Yes, they need that ability to take the split-second decision. The point about immunity, we said that if there are, the army is a disciplined organization. I have mentioned this. And the point is that if an army man has made a mistake, he should be liable for the crimes he has done. We are in support of trying to bring the people who have done these human right violations to the book. The implementation has not been great. We agree. That is why I also mentioned setting up of an independent committee. But their solution of only political discourse, you cannot have political discourse when the other people have come with the AK-47. It is very simple. So I would like to say, yes, the root cause needs to be addressed. Other things need to be addressed. But that needs, these things can happen when other people are coming without arms. When they come with arms, we also need to bring arms to the table. We have a highly disciplined and respected army that is very, what you call it, restricted in its use of force. And I believe that we should lay trust in their decisions. Yes, there have been violations of human rights. We are not denying that. But do those, I'm asking you a simple question. Do all the benefits of ASFA and the army being there outweigh all the costs which are there? Are you saying that if I remove ASFA tomorrow, all the problems will be solved? If the answer is yes, so you have it. But I think we all know the answer to it. So in chair and so in my dear friends, I think you know where the motion lies. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Points have been noted. Would the opponent like to raise for a point of order or a point of personal privilege?
Hi, can I raise an order?
Yeah.
So like before that clarification, in an order, can I point out an inconsistency in the speech? Or
No.
that's not all right? Because Rohan did the same during.
If there is a logical fallacy, yes, you can.
Yeah, logical fallacy.
Yeah. I mean, inconsistency in what sense? What do you mean?
He right now in his speech told that army will not be removed tomorrow because army, if it remove, it will lead to more insurgencies. But in his first speech, he told that look, these things are being periodically reviewed, and eventually we'll remove it.
See, this point of order is not an order. This
Okay.
doesn't. Yeah, it's not in motion. But yeah.
Okay. With that, we come to the end of this debate. Thank you so much, participants, for participating. It was a really informative debate for me. And I'm pretty sure the judge has a lot of feedback to give and pointers to make. So, Ashwin, over to you.
Just give me a minute. You just add me to the other one. You can hear me now?
Yeah. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you. So, thank you guys. I thought it was a very good debate. I felt that both the teams were very rigorous and robust in their defense of respective stances. But I did feel that the speed at which some debaters were speaking was sometimes difficult to follow. That being said, stylistically, I felt that both teams were very, very competent and engaging. In terms of content, it felt like both teams had researched well. Also, in terms of strategy, I thought that at least in terms of the constructive arguments, both teams had a coherent structure and apportioned the arguments well between the team members to develop the case. I did feel that the member of opposition in a lot of instances was more anecdotal than necessary and veered away from the constructive argument, minor. But I thought this could have been avoided. I thought good POIs were raised on both sides, and I would have liked to have seen more. I think some POIs were raised, but some speakers refused to answer a lot of them. But yeah, stylistically, as stated earlier, I thought both teams were excellent. There were a few point of order opportunities which were missed.
For example, the member of opposition stated that Deputy Prime Minister of India recently said, but the last Deputy Prime Minister of India was LK Advani in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. So that could have been pointed out. And I think if there was anything to separate between it, I thought that the proposition introduced a very strong principled analysis of ASPA and the context under which it is applied. The opposition gave a number of reasons to it in their rebuttal, did not necessarily attack the strong principled analysis of the proposition, I felt. Otherwise, I thought both teams did a very good job, and wish you the best of luck if you progress to the next round.
Okay. With that, thank you so much, Judge. Thank you so much. With that, we come to the conclusion of this debate. Participants, I thank you for taking part in this our Compass Complementary Debate. I'm pretty sure you guys had a great experience regarding the same. We'll keep you updated by the evening as to who advances to the semi-finals. But until then, have a great time. Stay safe. I hope you enjoyed the whole debate. And yeah, thank you so much for participating again. And have a great weekend, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
It was
Thanks,
fun.
Rishabh. Thanks, Judge. Thank you.
Bye, opposition. We had a good time.
Yeah, same. Thank you.